India and the Prerequisites of Communism by Babasaheb Ambedkar. Chapter 1. The Hindu Social Order, Its Essential Principles. Part 1. What is the character of the Hindu social order? Is it a free social order? To answer this question, some idea of what constitutes a free social order is necessary. Fortunately, the matter is not one of controversy. Since the days of the French Revolution, there is no difference as to the essentials of a free social order. There may be more, but two are fundamental. Generally speaking, they are two. The first is that the individual is an end in himself, and that the aim and object of society is the growth of the individual and the development of his personality. Society is not above the individual, and if the individual has to subordinate himself to society, it is because such subordination is for his betterment and only to the extent necessary. The second essential is that the terms of associated life between members of society must be regarded by consideration founded on liberty, equality, and fraternity. Why are these two essentials fundamental to a free social order? Why must the individual be the end and not the means of all social purposes? For an answer to this question, it is necessary to realize what we precisely mean when we speak of the human person. Why should we sacrifice our most precious possessions and our lives to defend the rights of the human person? No better answer to this question can be found than what is given by Professor Jacques Maritain. As Professor Maritain, in his essay on the conquest of freedom, says, what do we mean precisely when we speak of the human person? When we say that a person is a person, we do not mean merely that he is an individual, in the sense that an atom, a blade of grass, a fly, or an elephant is an individual. Man is an individual who holds himself in hand by his intelligence and his will. He exists not merely in a physical fashion. He has spiritual superexistence through knowledge and love, so that he is, in a way, a universe in himself, a microcosm, in which the great universe in its entirety can be encompassed through knowledge. By love, he can give himself completely to beings who are to him as it were other selves. For this relation, no equivalent can be found in the physical world. The human person possesses these characteristics because, in the last analysis, man, this flesh and these perishable bones, which are animated and activated by a divine fire, exist from the womb to the grave by virtue of the existence itself of his soul, which dominates time and death. Spirit is the root of personality. The notion of personality thus involves that of totality and independence, no matter how poor and crushed a person may be. He is a whole, and as a person, subsistent in an independent manner. To say that a man is a person is to say that in the depth of his being he is more a whole than a part, and more independent than servile. It is to say that he is a minute fragment of matter that is at the same time a universe, a beggar who participates in the absolute being, mortal flesh whose value is external, and a bit of straw into which heaven enters. It is this metaphysical mystery that religious thought designates when it says that the person is the image of God. The value of the person, his dignity and rights, belong to the order of things naturally sacred, which bear the imprint of the Father of Being, and which have in him the end of their movement. Why is equality essential? The best exposition of the subject is by Professor Beard in his essay on freedom in political thought, and I shall do no more than quote him. Says Professor Beard, the term equality is unfortunate, but no other word can be found as a substitute. Equality means exactly the same or equivalent in measure, amount, number, degree, value, or quality. It is a term exact enough in physics and mathematics, but obviously inexact when applied to human beings. What is meant by writers who have gone deepest into the subject is that human beings possess, in degree and in kind, fundamental characteristics that are common to humanity. These writers hold that when humanity is stripped of extrinsic goods and conventions incidental to time and place, it reveals essential characteristics so widely distributed as to partake of universality. Whether these characteristics be called primordial qualities, biological necessities, residues, or any other name matters little. No one can truthfully deny that they do exist. It is easy to point out inequalities in physical strength, in artistic skill, in material wealth, or in mental capacity, but this too is a matter of emphasis. At the end, it remains a fact that fundamental characteristics appear in all human beings. Their nature and manifestations are summed up in the phrase moral equality. Emphasis must be placed on the term moral. From time immemorial, it has been the fashion of critics to point out the obvious facts that in physical strength, talents, and wealth, human beings are not equal. The criticism is both gratuitous and irrelevant. No rational exponent of moral equality has even disputed the existence of obvious inequalities among human beings, even when he has pointed out inequalities which may be ascribed to tyranny or institutional prescriptions. The Declaration of Independence does not assert that all men are equal. It proclaims that they are created equal. In essence, the phrase moral equality asserts an ethical value, a belief to be sustained, and recognition of rights to be respected. Its validity cannot be demonstrated as a problem in mathematics can be demonstrated. It is asserted against inequalities in physical strength, talent, industry, and wealth. It denied that superior physical strength has a moral right to kill, eat, or oppress human beings merely because it is superior. To talents and wealth, the idea of moral equality makes a similar denial of right. And indeed, few can imagine themselves of superior physical strength, talents, and wealth will withhold from inferiors all moral rights. In such circumstances, government and wealth would go to superior physical strength, while virtue and talents would serve the brute man, as accomplished Greek slaves served the whims, passions, and desires to Roman conquerors. When the last bitter word of criticism has been uttered against the ideal of moral equality, there remains something in it which all except things must accept and in practice do accept, despite their shears and protests. A society without any respect for human personalities is a band of robbers. Why is fraternity essential? Fraternity is the name for the disposition of an individual to treat men as the object of reverence and love and the desire to be in unity with his fellow beings. This statement is well expressed by Paul when he said, "Of one blood are all nations of men. There is neither Jew nor Greek, neither bond nor free, neither male nor female, for yet are all one in Christ Jesus." Equally well was it expressed when the Pilgrim Fathers on their landing at Plymouth said, "We are knit together as a body in the most sacred covenant of the Lord, by virtue of which we hold ourselves tied to all care of each other's good and of the whole." These sentiments are of the essence of fraternity. Fraternity strengthens socialites and gives to each individual a stronger personal interest in practically consulting the welfare of others. It leads him to identify his feelings more and more with their good, or at least with an even greater degree of practical consideration for it. With the disposition to fraternity, he comes as though instructively to be conscious of him as being one who, of great course, pays regard to others. The good of others becomes to him a thing naturally and necessarily to be attended to like any of the physical conditions of our existence. Where people do not feel that entire sympathy with all others, concordance in the general direction of their conduct is impossible. For a person in whom social feeling is not developed cannot but bring himself to think of the rest of his fellow beings as rivals struggling with him for the means of happiness when he must endeavor to defeat in order that he may succeed in himself. What is liberty and why is it essential in a free social order? Liberty falls under two classes. There is civil liberty and there is political liberty. Civil liberty refers to one, liberty of movement, which is another name for freedom from arrest without due process of law. Two, liberty of speech, which of course includes liberty of thought, reading, writing, and discussion, and 3. Liberty of action. The first kind of liberty is, of course, fundamental. Not only fundamental, it is also most essential. About its value, there can be no manner of doubt. The second kind of liberty, which may be called freedom of opinion, is important for many reasons. It is a necessary condition of all progress, intellectual, moral, political, and social. Where it does not exist, the status quo becomes stereotyped, and all originality, even the most necessary, is discouraged. Liberty of action means doing what one likes to do. It is not enough that liberty of action should be formal, it must be real. So understood, liberty of action means effective power to do specific things. There is no freedom where there are no means of taking advantage of it. Real liberty of action exists only where exploitation has been annihilated, where no suppression of one class by another exists, where there is no unemployment, no poverty, and where a person is free from the fear of losing his job, home, food as a consequence of his action. Political liberty consists in the right of the individual to share in the framing of laws and in the making and unmaking of governments. Governments are instituted for securing to men certain inalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Government must, therefore, derive its power from those whose rights it is charged with the duty to protect. This is what is meant when it is said that the existence, power, and authority of the government must be derived from the consent of the governed. Political liberty is really a deduction from the principle of human personality and equality, for it implies that all political authority is derived from the people, that the people are capable of directing and controlling their public as well as their private lives to ends determined by themselves and by none else. These two tenets of a free social order are integrally connected. They are non-separable. Once the first tenet is admitted, the second tenet automatically follows. Once the sacredness of human personality is admitted, the necessity of liberty, equality, and fraternity must also be admitted as the proper climate for the development of personality. The end.